Hello and welcome to World News here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. And we begin with the latest on Ukraine. At least 2 people have been wounded in a Russian missile attack on Kyiv. Attacks were also reported in Sumy, Kharkiv, Dnipro, and Zaporizhzhia. The intensity of the strikes and their close proximity to the Polish border prompted Poland's Air Force to scramble jets as part of standard operating procedures. At the Ukrainian capital, a number of residential and non-residential buildings were damaged. The attack also sparked a fire at a gas station. 2 people were wounded in Kharkiv, where the combined missile and drone attacks damaged energy infrastructure, leading to 800 buildings losing power. The attacks appeared to signal an end to the brief energy ceasefire brokered by President Trump, who on January 29 said he personally asked Putin to cease attacks amid plunging temperatures expected to drop to minus 24 degrees in Kyiv overnight into Tuesday. Ukraine will not forget the Iranian-made Shahed drones striking its cities, President Zelenskyy said on his nightly address. The leader added that the EU is following Ukraine's footsteps in designating Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization.
The whole world sees what is happening in Iran, the killings there, how the Iranian regime has invested in spreading war and violence in the region and the world. Ukraine will not forget any of the thousands of Shaheds that strike our cities and villages, our people. The European Union has agreed on the decision to designate one of the main organizations of the regime in Iran, the so-called Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, as terrorist. We in Ukraine have already made such a decision and have already designated this organization as terrorist. For us, this issue is closed. All terrorists in the world deserve the same treatment and condemnation.
Russian violations of any future ceasefire plan would be met with a military response from Europe and the United States. Now, that's a plan which, according to the Financial Times, Ukraine has agreed to with Western powers. Now, the plan was discussed multiple times between Ukrainian, European, and American officials in December and January, and involves a tiered response to any ceasefire violations by Russia. Envoys from Kyiv, Moscow, and Washington are set to meet again on Wednesday and Thursday in Abu Dhabi to negotiate an end to the war. According to 3 individuals familiar with the matter under the plan, a Russian ceasefire breach would prompt a response within 24 hours, starting with a diplomatic warning and any actions by the Ukrainian military necessary to stop the violation. President Trump has no plans to reduce his country's forces in Europe. He said this, adding that his relationship with Europe is reportedly great. Well, Trump replied similarly when asked about Pentagon's national defense strategy, which announced a reduction in U.S. support for European defense. The U.S. president said that he gets along very well with Europe and that he increased its defense spending from 2% to 5%. Trump suggested that Europe give the U.S., quote, a lot of that money, and that America already sells military equipment to NATO. The U.S. president also cautioned Europe to be careful because, quote, there are those who say that Europe is already unrecognizable. Trump claims it's due to migration and the focus on renewable energy. The newly released Epstein files show that the late American financier was willing to share information on Donald Trump with Russia's Vladimir Putin and Sergei Lavrov. But the files show Epstein's empire of influence stretched to many corners of Europe, with Latvia alone mentioned over 500 times.
The office of President of the United States.
Donald Trump, the man who would become President of the United States, side by side with Jeffrey Epstein, the man who would be convicted as a serial sex offender. That NBC footage from 1992, captured on Trump's own Mar-a-Lago estate, now coming back to haunt the president, with his name repeatedly mentioned in the millions of Epstein files released by the Department of Justice.
I have nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein. I threw him out of my club many years ago because I thought he was a sick pervert.
And yet, this is a story that has his name entangled, including revelations that Epstein pushed to meet with Russia's Vladimir Putin and offer information about Trump, with the late financier trying to hash out arrangements via email between 2011 and 2014. It remains unclear if Epstein ever met with the Russian president, but he also claimed he could deliver tips on Trump to Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. And it's not just Russia. Despite Epstein hanging himself in his jail cell 7 years ago, the life he led has triggered a political earthquake felt all the way in Central and Eastern Europe. Latvia is among the countries referenced more than 500 times in the document dump and described as a place where girls could be recruited for sex work. In one email exchange, an anonymous sender even wrote that he had received a personal invitation from Latvia's Prime Minister to visit the country and, quote, say hello. Andris Berzins, the country's Prime Minister at the time, strongly denying any links.
I haven't invited anyone to my place, especially not to come and say hello. Why would I need someone to say hello to? The text is kind of odd, so I won't be able to satisfy you with anything interesting. In my opinion, there's nothing interesting there.
Further south, Slovakia is also facing the fallout of the Epstein files, with the resignation of Miroslav Lajčák, a top advisor to Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico. The documents show Lajčák was not just talking about girls with Epstein, but also taking a very different tack to the pro-European image he's long presented publicly, as he allegedly worked to set up meetings between Russia's Lavrov and far-right American strategist Steve Bannon.
The explosive discovery that he was sending to Jeffrey Epstein, his SMS that he loved Minister Lavrov, and he was preparing the meeting of Steve Bannon with the European politicians or even Slovak politicians. So he was representing Slovak social democracy, formally this party's social democracy, but at the same time, in the clandestine, he was acting in a completely different direction.
Lajčák firmly denies any wrongdoing, insisting he was never offered any sexual services by Epstein and did not know the extent of the predator's crimes. Even so, Lajčák has become another powerful politician to fall on his sword over Epstein's web of hurt and influence.
France has adopted a budget for 2026 after surviving 2 confidence votes on Monday. Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu has faced a string of no-confidence votes in recent weeks as he pushed the first sections of the 2026 state budget through Parliament without a vote. Lecornu secured support from the Socialists in exchange for freezing the pension reform that President Emmanuel Macron pushed through in 2023, which will reduce the deficit to less than originally planned. We are 6 deciding countries that have agreed to speed up together, said the German's finance minister in Warsaw. Poland, along with Germany, France, Italy, Spain, and the Netherlands, has joined the group of EU's biggest economies to boost the bloc's competitiveness and defense capabilities.
Buttering up Poland for a not-so-new idea. Trying to convince Warsaw of the need for a 2-speed European Union would normally be akin to selling sand in the desert. This time, however, Germany's renewed offer for creating a 2-speed Europe has a twist. Poland is invited. Warsaw had an answer ready.
It has our support in principle.
We won't be a new institution, no exclusive club, but we are 6 deciding countries that have agreed to speed up together.
This so-called E6 group picks out the 6 largest European economies to bypass the regular EU decision-making process on economic issues. Besides Poland and Germany, Klingbau's offer extends to France, Italy, Spain and the Netherlands. Together, the 6 countries represent around 70% of the EU's population. However, they lack the numbers to attain even a qualified majority in European Council voting, which demands at least 55% of the member states. And some decisions even require unanimity. That is where Germany's proposal comes in. If held back by the rest of the bloc, they agreed to push ahead on certain topics regardless. These topics include strengthening the euro in the global markets, reducing dependence on third countries, including China, for critical raw materials, improving coordination of defense investments, pushing forward the Capital Markets Union, because despite the single market being the cornerstone of the European Union, the ongoing lack of a single capital market is a huge barrier for European investments.
There is capital in Europe. Europe has savings, but that capital is often not leveraged effectively enough for both domestic economies and European economic growth.
The idea of a two-speed Europe is nothing new. Letting member states integrate at different levels and different speeds has, however, drawn the ire of smaller or poorer countries, including Poland, out of fear being left behind. But instead of letting it depend on whether a country is a net contributor to the bloc and part of the Eurozone, Klinkbaal's E6 initiative simply looks at economic size. The fact that Poland is not a member of the Eurozone and still uses the zloty is not an issue for Klinkbaal, and he has indicated the format remains open to other countries as well. For TVP World, Michiel van Blommestein.
And for more on that, let's now listen to commentary from Poland's former Prime Minister, Jan Krzysztof Bielecki.
Can you imagine that 27 countries is facing a serious problem, and then with the opposition of one little member state, everybody is obliged to put it on hold and wait until sometimes through kind of a host trading negotiations, the single one will eventually accept the proposal. This is not how European Union should be operating in the situation of the present geopolitics, tensions, war at our doorstep. Now we have to act quickly.
President Donald Trump announced a trade deal with India on Monday that will reduce U.S. tariffs on Indian goods from 50% to 18% in exchange for New Delhi halting purchases of Russian oil and lowering trade barriers.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor to have
Under the agreement, India will increase purchase of petroleum, defense equipment, electronics, pharmaceuticals, and telecoms products. In a social media post, Trump said that India had agreed to, quote, buy American at a much higher level, adding that India could buy up to $500 billion worth of U.S. energy, coal, along with technology, agricultural, and other products. An Indian official told Reuters that the deal represents an initial phase and that a more comprehensive agreement will be negotiated over the coming months. Throwing a coin into Rome's most famous fountain just got a little more complicated for tourists. The city has officially launched a new entry fee for the Trevi Fountain in a move to reduce overcrowding from tourism.
International visitors must now pay €2 to access the Trevi Fountain's lower perimeter, while Roman residents and children under 6 remain exempt.
In short, €2 to enter the Trevi Fountain isn't a particularly excessive cost, and it allows us to guarantee safety, usability, and free admission for Romans. Meanwhile, beauty is free for Romans, who are residents, who are the citizens of this city.
The new ticketing system follows a trial period that saw 10 million visitors to the site, often reaching peaks of 70,000 visitors in a single day. The fee only applies during peak hours, meaning early birds and night owls can still enjoy the Baroque masterpiece for free before the ticket booths open.
We're fine with paying for the ticket, let's say willingly, because I want to get closer anyway, and honestly, maybe there's a little less crowd than before, because last time I found a lot of people, a lot of crowds, but this time maybe there's a little less crowd.
City officials say the revenue will be funneled directly into the conservation of the fountain to ensure it survives the travails of modern tourism.
And that's all for this edition of World News here on TVP World. We'll be back at the top of the hour. Stay tuned for more.